Okay, I'm back with Louisa Jewell for our second segment, talking about utilizing happiness for optimizing longevity. So I really want to move us into that discussion around longevity. So if you don't mind for a second, I'm going to sort of read this question. When we think of the human life course, and then this is a phrase that is used quite often in longevity discussion, is the life course model. At different stages as people age, what does the research tell us, if there is any, because you talked about research on our first segment, tell us about how our view of happiness changes as we age. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, people find that their view of happiness changes more from, when we're younger, we might be more focused on hedonistic type happiness. So what I mean by that is we might be more into kind of the thrill seeking or what we call positive emotion and joyful experiences where we want to be going out, having fun with our friends, going out dancing, going out to the clubs, doing the skydiving or, whatever we think we need to kind of have that kind of fun when we're younger. That's kind of important to us.
Right, and of course, the other aspect of that, not to interrupt, but I am, is that people at a certain age in their teens and 20s never think you're going to die.
Yes, yeah.
Really, there was a joke we used to have with friends of mine. They like it's almost a virtual growth party atmosphere in some ways.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah. Well, and then, as you get older, you find that your happiness changes in the sense that you find more contentment in more meaningful things. So as you're having children, for example, changing poopy diapers really is not a fun, hedonistic thing to do. It doesn't bring you joy. However, if you ask mothers, for example, they've done studies with mothers, and they will say, what makes you the happiest? What gives you the greatest joy and happiness in your life? And mothers will always say, oh, my children. And then when you do studies with them where they have them wear a little beeper around all day, and researchers will randomly beep these mothers, and then at that moment, the mother has to say what they're doing and how happy they are. And mothers really are most miserable when they're taking care of their children.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, because, again, like I said, changing poopy diapers and running after a toddler is a lot of hard work. You get stressed out. It's never ending. You can't take a break. Your kids are crying. And yet, again, if you were to ask a mother what brings her the greatest joy and happiness, she would say, my children. And we can only bridge this really with a feeling that this is meaningful. This has purpose for me. When I'm changing my daughter's poopy diaper, I feel love for her. I feel that inner joy. So it's not a jump up and down, yay, I'm so joyful, but it's more of a loving, meaningful thing that you're doing, and that is what can bring you that kind of silent, quiet joy and happiness in your life. So that's kind of a whole pillar in positive psychology that we study, this pillar of meaning. And we do find that as people get older, they're more resilient because they've been through more. And so they feel that even though they've gone through these certain life experiences that may have been very tragic, they've learned from them, they've grown from them. And we have this concept in positive psychology called post-traumatic growth, for example.
Oh.
And as an example of that, I have a girlfriend of mine who had breast cancer about 6 or 7 years ago. And she says to me, breast cancer is the best thing that ever happened to her. And I say, well, how can you say that? It's terrible that you had breast cancer. And she says, no, look at my life now. My life has been completely transformed. After my breast cancer, I am more grateful, I'm more loving, I'm more joyful, I eat better, I work out every day. Her life has completely transformed. So now you've taken something that is a tragedy and terrible, and it's actually transformed her life for the better. So a lot of what we find with older people is they've been through this, they've realized they didn't die, they're actually okay, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And they take those life lessons into new life experiences, and they can see things with a new perspective. So I think that's how happiness changes over our lifetime.
And of course, taking that aging piece a little bit further out, when people get into their later years, let's say 60s, 70s, 80s even, and then you talk about the children aspect. I get great fulfillment out of my grandchildren. So you hear that on the positive side. But then there's a lot of people who are alone when they're older, and there's a social isolation, I can say that properly, isolation that comes from that. And so so now we have new, not necessarily tragedies, but new challenges.
I see, and that's what I would hope would come out of some of this contest that's going on at Stanford is that, and I think that is really the most critical because in everything that we study in positive psychology, what we found is that social connectedness is critical to happiness and well-being. It's not a nice to have. It is critical. People die when they're lonely. People die when they're disengaged from other people. And so anything we can do to connect older people to some sort of community and some social interaction, and I don't just mean via, I mean, it's good to be able to do a Skype call, but to be able to have a real human interaction. It's not just about emailing. We know that there's a difference when I'm actually looking right in your eyes. There is a different physiological response in my body than if I'm just emailing you. So it does make a difference to have real people around you. And I was talking to a gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans group the other day, and I said, there's a lot of people that are against what you do. They're not in agreement with how you live your life. Don't worry about those people. Focus on finding your tribe. Find people who don't care about that and they just love you for who you are. And there's lots of those people who are accepting of you. So find your tribe because that is so important. And so for older people to find other people that are at home and lonely and want to have that interactivity and force yourself to get out as much as possible, if that is possible, or put yourself in a living situation where you're going to be running into people all the time. It's so, so important to our well-being.
And what's interesting about that is it ties into another one of the themes in the Stanford Longevity Design Contest is the word mobility. So if you can design things that will increase a person's mobility to get that social interaction, then there will hopefully be this happiness. So again, it's an outcome, in a way, of design.
Yes, it is. And, we talk about these outcomes. It is important to think about that because people who actually focus on being happy are less happy than people who do not focus on being happy, but rather just engage in the behaviors that bring them happiness. So if I know that social interactivity is important, then I'm going to put myself, because I work primarily by myself, I've now moved into an office where I have lots of people around me all the time. I'm not necessarily working one-on-one with them, but I see them when I go get coffee and water and everything else. So there's always people around me. So there are things you can do, or if I know that being in nature helps me be happy, I bring my dog to work and I get out and I take her for a walk every lunch hour. Even just petting my dog brings me happiness, so bringing my dog to work is another thing I do.
Well, actually, that was just in the news the other day when they were talking about older people and they were talking about pet therapy. And I've seen this in action in long-term care facilities when you bring a dog or a cat or a rabbit or something, and the person can actually touch the animal, that this makes them happier. So
yes.
In some ways, maybe and in fact, in Japan, they've come up with these robot animals, pandas and whatever, that they take into these long-term care places, and the older people play with these robotic animals. So they think they're real, but it's the fuzziness of it and so on, and they're animated and so on and so forth. So it's rather interesting. It'll be interesting to see what kind of designs they come up with in this particular contest. And as I say, in the middle of January, they will be announcing the finalists, and then the final award winning will be in April of this year.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that because I have never seen research on whether a robotic, I mean, there's something about having another living being with you. So I'm curious I don't know the research on whether a robot would increase happiness or not. I don't know. But I do know, for example, that when I'm petting my dog, my oxytocin levels rise, which is like our love hormone, and also the oxytocin levels of my dog rise as well. So
Well, it's all about that word connectivity again.
yes, exactly.
So I'll tell you what, let's do a segment 3, and we'll come back and finalize this discussion around using happiness and longevity, and I want to get your thoughts on what that really means.
Okay.
So we'll talk to you in segment 3.
All right, sounds good.